Have you ever been told by someone you loved that you're worthless, that everything you care about is pointless, that you'll never amount to anything? My husband did that to me. But here's what he didn't know. My silly hobby was about to become a fortune he could never reach. And the first thing I did with that fortune, I bought his dreams right out from under him. How much pain can one person endure before they finally say, enough? How many times can someone belittle your passions, your worth, your very existence, before you realize you deserve better? And when you finally break free, when you finally prove them wrong, how sweet is that victory? Let me take you back to the moment everything changed, the moment when I learned that sometimes the person who tears you down gives you the exact motivation you need to rise higher than they ever could. It was a Thursday evening in March when Richard came home and shattered what was left of our 22-year marriage. I was in our spare bedroom, the one I'd converted into my pottery studio over his constant objections. My hands were covered in clay, shaping what would become a vase, losing myself in the meditative rhythm of the wheel. I heard the front door slam. That should have been my first warning. Richard never slammed doors. He was too controlled, too conscious of maintaining appearances. "Margaret!" His voice cut through the quiet house like a blade. I didn't respond immediately. I was at a critical point in shaping the rim of the vase, and if I stopped now, hours of work would be ruined. Just 30 more seconds. "Margaret!" My hand slipped. The vase collapsed inward, destroyed. 22 years of marriage, and I should have known Richard's convenience always came before my creations. I took a breath, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked into the living room. Richard was standing by the window, his suit jacket still on, his briefcase clutched in one hand. But it was his expression that made my stomach drop. Not anger, but something colder, finality. He said, "We need to talk," not looking at me. How many relationships have ended with those exact 4 words? How many lives have been upended by that simple, terrible phrase? "Okay," I said quietly, settling onto the edge of the couch. "What's wrong?" He finally turned to face me, and I saw it then, the complete absence of the man I'd married. The Richard who'd written me poetry in college, who'd promised to support my dreams, who'd said my creativity was one of the things he loved most about me, that Richard was gone. In his place stood a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment I couldn't process them. We'd had problems, sure. What couple married for over 2 decades hadn't? But divorce? That seemed to come from nowhere. "What, Richard? I don't understand." "Of course you don't." He set down his briefcase with precise care. "You never do. You're so wrapped up in your little hobby, your pointless pottery projects, that you don't see what's happening in the real world." Little hobby, pointless projects. The word stung more than the divorce announcement. "My pottery isn't pointless," I said, hearing the defensive note in my voice and hating it. "I sell pieces. I take commissions. Just last month I made $300. Richard, I make that in 3 hours. Your business is a joke. It's always been a joke. You're playing at being an artist while I shoulder all the real financial responsibility." "That's not fair. I worked full-time until 5 years ago. I contributed as a sales assistant at a department store, making barely above minimum wage." She shook her head. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when my colleagues ask what my wife does, and I have to say you make bowls in our spare bedroom?" Each word was calculated to wound, and they hit their marks perfectly. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller with every syllable.
I gave up my job to support your career, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You said you were getting the promotion, that we'd be more comfortable with me at home, that I could finally pursue my art seriously. And I was wrong. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. I thought maybe you turned it into something real, a legitimate business, but instead you've spent 5 years playing with mud while I pay for everything. The mortgage, the car, the utilities, everything. I pay for my supplies. I contribute to the groceries with pocket change. His tone was withering. Richard, let's be honest. You're dead weight. You're 47 years old with no career, no real income, no prospects. You're exactly what you were when I married you, a dreamer with no practical skills. Have you ever had someone you loved reduce your entire existence to nothing? Strip away every accomplishment, every effort, every dream, until you're left wondering if maybe they're right, if maybe you really are worthless? Why are you saying these things? I asked, and I hated that my eyes were filling with tears. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Because I'm done pretending. I'm done carrying you. I'm done living in this mediocre house with mediocre furniture and a mediocre wife who thinks selling a ceramic bowl for $50 is an achievement.
Then what do you want? The question came out sharper than I intended, anger finally cutting through the hurt. I told you, a divorce. I've already consulted with a lawyer. Since you have virtually no income, you're not entitled to much. The house is in my name. I bought it before we married. You'll get a small settlement, maybe enough to rent a place for a while. After that, you're on your own. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. 22 years reduced to a small settlement and on your own. There's someone else, I said, and it wasn't a question. Nobody delivers this level of calculated coldness without having their next chapter already written. For the first time, something that might have been shame flickered across his face. But it passed quickly. Vanessa works in real estate. She's successful, driven, ambitious. Everything you're not. He paused, and I could see him deciding whether to twist the knife deeper. He did. She's also younger. She takes care of herself. She doesn't spend her days covered in clay, looking like she just crawled out of a basement. I looked down at myself. My old jeans, paint-stained, my oversized sweater with clay smudges on the sleeves, my hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, my hands permanently stained with traces of iron oxide that no amount of scrubbing could remove. When did I stop caring about my appearance? When had comfort replaced confidence? But even as I asked myself these questions, another voice whispered, "Why should it matter? Why should my worth be measured by designer clothes and perfect makeup? Why should how I look determine whether I deserve love and respect?" "I'd like you to move out by the end of the month," Richard continued, oblivious or indifferent to my internal struggle. "That gives you 2 weeks. The lawyers will be in touch about finalizing everything." 2 weeks? I finally met his eyes. You're giving me 2 weeks to dismantle 22 years of marriage? What's to dismantle? You don't own anything here except your pottery equipment. Pack that up, find a place, move on. It's really quite simple. Simple. As if uprooting your entire life were no more complicated than changing your socks. And if I fight this, if I contest the divorce? He smiled, and it was perhaps the most chilling thing I had seen in our entire marriage. "Then I'll make sure you get even less, Margaret. I have the better lawyer. I have the income. I have the resources. You have, what, a kiln and some clay? Fight me if you want, but you'll lose." He picked up his briefcase and walked toward our bedroom. His bedroom, now, I supposed. At the doorway, he turned back. "One more thing. Vanessa and I have been looking at houses. There's a property we both love. The lakeside villa development. beautiful homes right on the water, the kind of place I've always dreamed of living. His smile widened. The kind of place I could never afford while supporting your expensive hobby. But now, he shrugged, now I can have everything I want. Funny how that works out. He left me standing in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life I'd thought was solid. 22 years. Gone in 20 minutes. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the light to fade. Long enough for the house to grow dark around me. Long enough for the shock to slowly transform into something else. Rage. I walked back to my studio. The collapsed vase sat on the wheel, a ruined mess. I stared at it for a long moment, then did something I'd never done before. I took the failed piece and threw it against the wall as hard as I could. It exploded into dozens of clay fragments, spattering across the floor, the wall, the table. The destruction was cathartic, but it wasn't enough. I sat down at my wheel, pulled a fresh lump of clay from my storage bin, and began to work. My hands moved with a precision born of fury, shaping and molding with an intensity I'd never felt before. If Richard thought my pottery was worthless, I'd prove him wrong. If he thought I was dead weight, I'd show him exactly what this dead weight could do. If he wanted to buy his dream house with his successful new girlfriend, well, we'd see about that. Paula called around midnight. She'd been my best friend since college, the one person who'd stuck by me through everything. I just heard, she said without preamble, from Janet, who heard from Susan, who saw Richard at some restaurant with a woman who definitely wasn't you. Please tell me the rumors aren't true. They're true. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, emotionless. He wants a divorce. He's giving me 2 weeks to move out. That bastard, that absolute bastard. Paula's rage was oddly comforting. What are you going to do? I looked at the piece taking shape on my wheel. It was unlike anything I'd ever created. Larger, bolder, with flowing lines that seemed to capture movement itself. The fury in my hands was translating into art that felt alive. I'm going to become successful, I said. So successful that he'll choke on his words. So successful that when he sees what I've become, he'll realize what he threw away.
Hell yes, Paula's voice turned fierce. You know what? I'm calling Daniel, my boss. He's been asking about you for months, wanting to see your work. I kept putting him off because you said you weren't ready. But you know what? You're ready. You've always been ready. Richard just convinced you that you weren't. Paula, I don't know. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., bring your best 12 pieces. Daniel's gallery specializes in contemporary ceramics. He's launching a new exhibit in 3 months. If he likes your work, and he will because it's brilliant, you could be part of it. A gallery exhibit? The idea seemed impossible. People like me didn't get gallery exhibits. People like me sold bowls at craft fairs for $50. Except, why not? Who said people like me couldn't succeed? Richard? The man who just reduced my entire life's work to a silly hobby. 10 a.m., Paula repeated firmly. And Maggie, wear something nice. Not for them. For you. Remind yourself that you're more than what Richard made you feel. After we hung up, I looked at myself in the studio mirror. Really looked. Yes, I was 47. Yes, I had clay under my fingernails and in my hair. Yes, my clothes were comfortable rather than fashionable. But my hands? My hands created beauty from formless earth. My hands shaped and molded and brought imagination into reality. These hands that Richard called useless were capable of magic. I worked through the night. By dawn, I'd finished 5 new pieces, each one better than anything I'd created before. Grief and rage and determination had combined into something powerful, and I'd channeled it all into the clay. At 8 a.m., I showered, scrubbing away as much clay staining as I could. I dug through my closet until I found the dress I'd bought 2 years ago for Richard's company party, the one he'd said made me look presentable. I'd hated it then. But now, looking at myself in the mirror, I saw something different. Not presentable, professional, capable, strong. I loaded my best pieces into my car with painstaking care. 12 pieces that represented years of work, evolution, growth. Bowls, vases, a sculptural piece that didn't serve any practical purpose except to be beautiful. I'd made it 3 years ago, and Richard had laughed, asking what use was art that couldn't even hold water. Now, looking at its flowing organic curves, I saw it differently. Beauty didn't need to be useful to have worth. Neither did I. The drive to Paula's gallery felt surreal. Was I really doing this? Was I really taking the first step toward a future without Richard? Toward proving that my silly hobby had value? The gallery was in the Arts District, a renovated warehouse with high ceilings and perfect natural light. Paula met me at the door, her hug fierce and long.
"You look amazing," she whispered. "And your pieces? I peeked in your car. Maggie, they're incredible." Daniel turned out to be a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through to the soul of things. He helped me carry in my pieces, handling each one with a reverence that made my throat tight. When everything was arranged on a large table, he stood back, arms crossed, studying my work with an intensity that made me nervous. Minutes passed. Paula squeezed my hand. Still he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. "How long have you been working in ceramics?" 12 years seriously, longer as a hobby. "And these pieces, when were they created?" "Various times. The oldest is 5 years old. The newest," I gestured to the sculptural piece, "I finished that this morning." His eyebrows rose. "This morning? After working through the night?" I nodded. "You can tell." He picked up the piece carefully. "There's an urgency here, an emotion. The technical skill is excellent. Your glazing, your forms, your understanding of the medium. But this," he held up the sculpture, "this has soul. This has pain and fury and determination. This tells a story." Tears pricked my eyes. When was the last time someone had really seen my work, really understood what I was trying to express? "I want all 12 pieces for the spring exhibit, and I want 12 more." "Can you do that? 3 months to create 12 pieces of this caliber." I thought about Richard's words. Dead weight, pointless hobby, playing with mud. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can do that." "Good. Paula will work out the details with you. Commission structure, pricing, marketing. But Margaret," he set down the sculpture and looked directly at me, "you're not a hobbyist. You're an artist, a real one. Start believing that." I left the gallery in a daze. In the span of 12 hours, my entire life had been torn apart and begun rebuilding itself into something new, something Richard couldn't understand or diminish. But I was just getting started. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity that left no time for wallowing in self-pity. And honestly, that was exactly what I needed. I found a small studio apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't much, 1 room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, and questionable heating. But it had something my old house never had, a spacious basement storage unit that the landlord agreed to let me convert into a pottery studio. The rent was $800 a month, manageable if I was careful. Very careful. Richard was surprisingly absent during the move. He'd leave for work before I woke up and return after I'd gone to bed, usually at my wheel in the spare room, working frantically on new pieces. On the few occasions we crossed paths, he'd look at me with something between pity and disdain, as if I were already fading from his life like a bad dream he was eager to forget. Good. Let him forget. Let him underestimate.
Let him think I was fading away into nothing. Paula helped me move, along with Daniel and 2 guys from the gallery. As we loaded my kiln into the moving truck, Richard appeared in the driveway, home early for once. "You're taking that?" He gestured to the kiln with obvious distaste. "That thing weighs a ton and probably violated about 6 HOA regulations." "It's mine," I said, simply. "I paid for it with my craft fair sales. You said yourself I own nothing here except my pottery equipment." He shrugged. "Fine. Just remember to leave your keys on the counter when you're done." Daniel, who'd been listening to this exchange, set down the box he was carrying and extended his hand to Richard. "You must be the husband, Daniel Morrison, gallery owner. Your wife is going to be the centerpiece of my spring exhibition. Her work is extraordinary." Richard shook his hand automatically, that practiced corporate smile in place. "Gallery exhibition. How nice. I'm sure it'll be lovely." The condescension dripped from every word, but Daniel just smiled wider. "Oh, it'll be more than lovely. Margaret's pieces are already generating buzz in the contemporary ceramics community. I've had 3 serious collectors ask about pre-buying before the exhibition even opens." He turned to me. "Which reminds me, we need to discuss insurance values for the pieces. I'm thinking we should insure the collection for at least $150,000. The number hung in the air. Richard's expression flickered. Confusion, then disbelief, then something that might have been alarm. $150,000 for pottery? For art, Daniel corrected smoothly. Margaret's work commands serious attention. The sculptural piece alone, the one she completed recently, I've already had an inquiry about it from a collector in New York. They're offering $12,000. I watched Richard's face carefully. He was doing the math. If one piece was worth $12,000 and I had 24 pieces in the exhibition, "That's ridiculous," Richard said finally, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Nobody pays that much for a ceramic bowl." "You're absolutely right," Daniel agreed. "Nobody pays that much for a bowl. They pay that much for art, for vision, for pieces that speak to something deeper than utility." He picked up another box. "Anyway, I should get back to loading. Richard, pleasure meeting you. Margaret, I'll see you at the studio tomorrow to finalize the exhibition layout." After they left with another load, Richard lingered in the driveway. I could feel him watching me as I wrapped newspaper around a set of smaller pieces. "This gallery thing," he said finally, "it's not real, is it? He's just being nice because Paula works for him." Have you ever had someone so threatened by your potential success that they couldn't accept it might be genuine? That's where Richard was, unable to process that maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about me. "It's real," I said, not looking up from my packing. "Very real." "Margaret, be sensible. These art types, they make promises they don't keep. They'll string you along, and then the exhibition will happen, nothing will sell, and you'll be right back where you started, broke and unemployed." "Maybe," I allowed. "Or maybe I'll surprise you. People like us don't get gallery exhibitions and 6-figure sales. We're practical people, not artists." He said artists like it was a dirty word. "People like us?" I finally looked at him directly. "Richard, you don't know what kind of person I am. You stopped paying attention years ago. You decided I was worthless, and that became your truth, but it was never mine." I saw anger flash across his face, quickly suppressed. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to save you from disappointment. But fine. Chase your little dream. When it falls apart, don't come crying to me." "I won't," I promised. "You've made it very clear that I'm on my own." He left then, and I felt something inside me settle. The last thread of hope that maybe he'd apologize, maybe he'd realize what he was throwing away, maybe he'd fight for our marriage. That thread finally snapped, and instead of pain, I felt relief. I was free. The next 3 months were the hardest I'd ever worked in my life. My new studio apartment was drafty and small, but the basement pottery space was perfect. I set up my wheel, my kiln, my glazing station, and my work tables. I hung good lighting and installed a dehumidifier. I created a space that was entirely mine, with no one to tell me it was pointless or silly or a waste of time. Paula stopped by most evenings after work, bringing dinner and company. "You're going to work yourself to death," she'd say, watching me shape clay at midnight. "When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" "I'll sleep after the exhibition," I'd reply, my hands never stopping their rhythm on the wheel. But it wasn't just about work. It was about transformation. Every piece I created carried a piece of my journey. The pain of rejection, the fury of being underestimated, the determination to prove my worth. Not to Richard, to myself. I started an Instagram account for my work. Paula had been nagging me about it for years, but I'd always been too self-conscious. What if nobody liked it? What if people left mean comments? What if I put myself out there and got nothing but crickets? But now, those fears seemed small compared to the reality I'd already faced. Richard had said the worst things imaginable to me. What could internet strangers do that would hurt more than that? The account grew slowly at first. 100 followers, then 500, then 1,000. People were responding to my work, commenting on the emotion they saw in the pieces, asking about commissions and prices. One evening, about 6 weeks into my 3-month deadline, Paula burst into my studio with her phone held high. "You need to see this," she said, breathless, "right now." It was an article in Contemporary Ceramics magazine, one of the major publications in the art world. The headline read, "Emerging Artist to Watch, Margaret Chen's Powerful Exploration of Transformation." They'd featured photos of 4 of my pieces from Daniel's preview shots. The article talked about the raw emotional honesty of my work and called me a mature voice, bringing lived experience to contemporary ceramics. "How did they even know about me?" I asked, stunned. "Daniel submitted your work to them. He didn't tell you because he didn't want to get your hopes up. Maggie, this is huge. This magazine has a circulation of 50,000, and it's read by every serious collector and gallery owner in the country." That night, my Instagram followers jumped by 3,000. The next morning, I had 17 emails from galleries in different cities asking about my work. By the end of the week, a museum in Seattle had inquired about including one of my pieces in their permanent collection. Richard, of course, knew nothing about any of this. We hadn't spoken since I'd moved out, communicating only through lawyers about the divorce settlement. He'd offered me $25,000, a pittance after 22 years of marriage. My lawyer said I could fight for more, but I declined. I didn't want his money. I didn't want anything from him, except the freedom to build my own success. 2 months into my 3-month deadline, I ran into Vanessa at the grocery store. I recognized her immediately from Facebook photos Richard hadn't bothered to make private. She was exactly as he'd described: polished, professional, perfect makeup and designer clothes, even for a Wednesday afternoon shopping trip. She recognized me too. There was an awkward moment where we both pretended we hadn't seen each other, but the aisle was too narrow to avoid a confrontation. "Margaret," she said, finally, her smile tight and false. "Richard told me you'd moved to this neighborhood." "Vanessa," I kept my voice neutral. "Nice to finally meet you." "Yes, well," she glanced at my cart, mostly ramen, coffee, and the cheapest vegetables I could find. I was funneling every spare dollar into materials for my pottery.
The subtle dig was clear. She had seen my cart and made her judgment. Poor Margaret, living on pennies while Richard moved on to better things. "I'm doing well, actually. Working on an exhibition. Keeping busy." "Oh, the pottery thing. Yes, Richard mentioned that too." She laughed, a delicate, dismissive sound. "It's nice that you have a hobby to keep yourself occupied. Richard and I have been so busy with work and house hunting that I don't have time for hobbies anymore." "House hunting?" I repeated. "Find anything good?" Her eyes lit up, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. "Actually, yes. We put an offer on a house in the Lakeside Villa development. It's absolutely stunning. 5 bedrooms, waterfront, chef's kitchen, home theater. It's Richard's dream house. He's been talking about living there for years." I knew. He'd talked about it to me too, back when we were still us, back when his dreams were supposed to be our dreams. "The only problem," Vanessa continued, warming to her subject now, "is that it's priced at $1.2 million, which is stretching even Richard's budget. We need to save up for a larger down payment before the bank will approve the loan. Another 6 months probably, but it'll be worth the wait." 6 months. They needed 6 months to save enough money to buy Richard's dream house. I felt something click into place in my mind, an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "That sounds lovely. I hope it works out for you." "Oh, it will," she said confidently. "Richard's very determined when he wants something, and what Richard wants, Richard gets." After she left, I stood in that grocery aisle for a long time, staring at my cart of cheap food and thinking about Lakeside Villa, thinking about Richard's dreams, thinking about 6 months. And then I took out my phone and called Daniel. "Daniel? Hi. Question. If the exhibition goes well, if pieces sell at the prices you're projecting, how quickly would I actually see that money? Commission payments are usually made within 30 days of sale. Why? Need funds for something?" "Maybe," I said slowly. "How do you feel about being a little bit vindictive?" His laugh was warm and slightly wicked. "Tell me more." The exhibition opening was scheduled for a Friday night in late May. 3 months of work had resulted in 24 pieces that represented everything I'd learned, everything I'd felt, everything I'd become. Daniel had arranged them throughout the gallery space like a narrative journey, starting with older, more conventional pieces and progressing to the newer works that practically vibrated with emotion. The price tags were terrifying. The sculptural piece that had attracted attention from the New York collector was priced at $15,000. Even my smaller bowls were marked at $800 to $1,200. Part of me wanted to tell Daniel he was insane, that nobody would pay those prices. But he just smiled and said, "Trust me. Trust yourself." Paula had insisted on taking me shopping for an outfit for the opening. Nothing in my closet was appropriate for a gallery exhibition, she declared. We found a simple black dress that made me feel elegant rather than overdressed, and paired it with jewelry I made myself, ceramic beads I glazed in rich blues and greens. "You look like an artist," Paula said approvingly, "not like someone trying to be an artist, like someone who is one." The night of the opening, I was a wreck of nerves. What if nobody came? What if they came but hated the work? What if I deluded myself into thinking I had talent when really I was just Richard's failed wife playing at being creative? Stop spiraling, Paula commanded, pressing a glass of wine into my hand. People are already arriving. Deep breath. You've got this. The first hour was a blur of faces and conversations. More people showed up than I dared hope. Collectors Paula and Daniel knew, other artists from the community, journalists from art publications, and random people who'd seen the promotional materials and were curious. They moved through the space, studying my work with serious attention. They asked questions about my process, my inspirations, my techniques. They treated me like a real artist, not a hobbyist playing with mud. And they bought pieces. By 8 p.m., 7 of my works had small red sold stickers next to them. By 9 p.m., it was 12. By 10 p.m., when the official opening was winding down, 19 of my 24 pieces had sold. Daniel found me standing in front of one of my unsold pieces, still trying to process what had happened. "Do you know what you just did?" he asked, grinning. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "You just sold $187,000 worth of art in one night. After commission, you're walking away with about $140,000. Margaret, you're not just successful, you're a sensation." The number didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. People like me? No, I stopped that thought. That was Richard's voice in my head, and I was done listening to Richard's voice. People like me, people who worked hard, who had talent, who refused to give up, people like me could absolutely make that kind of money. "There's more," Daniel said. "The New York collector who'd inquired about your sculptural piece? They came tonight. They want to commission 5 more pieces. They're offering $75,000 for the collection. And the museum in Seattle confirmed they want to purchase one of your pieces for their permanent collection. Margaret, your career just launched." I sat down heavily on a bench, my legs suddenly unable to support me. 3 months ago, I'd been crying in a spare bedroom, convinced I was worthless. Now, I was a professional artist with a sold-out show and more opportunities than I could process. "I need to make a phone call," I said suddenly, pulling out my phone. "Now? The exhibition isn't over." "Now," I said firmly. "Trust me." I stepped outside into the cool May evening and dialed a number I'd saved weeks ago, a realtor who specialized in luxury properties. "Hi, this is Margaret Chen. We spoke a few weeks ago about the lakeside villa property, the 5-bedroom waterfront house. Is it still available?" There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Yes, it is. Are you interested in making an offer?" I thought about Richard, bragging about his dreams, about Vanessa, dismissing my pottery as a cute hobby, about 6 months of saving while I worked my magic. "I'd like to make a cash offer," I said. "Full asking price, $1.2 million. Can you draw up the paperwork tonight?" Another pause, longer this time. "Miss Chen, did you say cash, as in you have the full amount available?" "I will by Monday when the bank opens." "Is that a problem?" No, not a problem at all. Miss Chen, let me call the sellers. A cash offer at full price. They're going to be very interested. Can I call you back in an hour?" "You can call me back in 10 minutes. I'm standing outside my sold-out gallery exhibition, and I'd like to celebrate with some good news." When I hung up, Paula was standing in the doorway, her mouth open. Did you really just? I really did. And I started laughing. Once I started, I couldn't stop.
I laughed until tears ran down my face, until my stomach hurt, until Paula was laughing too, even though she didn't fully understand why. You magnificent, petty, brilliant woman! You're buying his dream house out from under him. I'm buying my dream house, I corrected. The fact that it happens to be the same house he's been coveting for years, that's just a happy coincidence.
The realtor called back in 8 minutes. The sellers accepted my offer. Subject to inspection and paperwork, Lakeside Villa was mine. I went back into the gallery and let myself be celebrated. Let myself feel proud. Let myself accept that maybe, just maybe, I was exactly as talented and valuable as Daniel and Paula had been insisting all along. The night was perfect, but I knew something that made it even better. Richard and Vanessa were about to find out that the house they'd been planning to buy, the house they'd been saving for, the house Richard had dreamed about for years, that house now belonged to his worthless ex-wife. And I couldn't wait to see his face when he found out. The laughter erupted from me, wild, freeing, and slightly unhinged. Paula grabbed my shoulders, shaking me gently. "Margaret Chin, you are my hero. Did you really just buy Richard's $12 million dream house with pottery money?" $1.2 million, I corrected, wiping a tear from my eye. And yes, I did. But how? I know the show was a success, but $1.2 million in cash? The show netted me $140,000. The Seattle Museum purchase added another $35,000. And the New York Commission? Daniel negotiated a 50% advance. That was another $37,500. It wasn't enough for the whole thing, not even close. Paula looked confused. So how? I've been a practical person for 22 years, Paula. Richard taught me how to save, how to invest, how to be responsible with money. While he was paying the mortgage, I was taking every penny I ever earned from my part-time job years ago, from every $50 craft fair bowl, and putting it into low-risk mutual funds, the nest egg I'd been saving for in case of emergency. I'd almost forgotten about it. Richard definitely forgot about it. He thought my income was just pocket change. Turns out, pocket change adds up over 2 decades. I had combined my secret savings with my explosive new income and liquidated everything. It was a massive gamble. It was everything I had. The gallery sales gave me the confidence, and the commission advance pushed me over the edge. I drained every account. But I did it. It's mine. Paula stared at me, her expression shifting from amusement to profound respect. He called you dead weight. He called you worthless. And you just bought his entire future. The next few weeks were a logistical whirlwind that perfectly masked the emotional one. While Richard's lawyers sent my lawyer condescending letters about the $25,000 settlement, which I'd instructed my lawyer to accept without argument, I was busy with my own team. I was signing mortgage documents? No, I was signing title transfers. I was meeting with inspectors, with utility companies, and with a moving company to retrieve my things from the tiny storage unit and the even tinier studio apartment. The day I got the keys, I drove to Lakeside Villa alone. I parked my 10-year-old sedan in the 3-car garage right next to the charging station built for a Tesla. I walked through the front door. The house was silent, echoing, and smelled of fresh paint and new carpet.
The foyer was 2 stories high with a chandelier that looked like a cascade of crystal tears. The living room had a wall of glass that overlooked the shimmering lake. The chef's kitchen had marble countertops and appliances that cost more than my car. I walked through all 5 bedrooms. One for me, one for Paula when she visited, one for guests, and 2 would make an excellent wing for my new studio. I found the perfect space, a large bonus room over the garage with its own bathroom and a balcony overlooking the water. The light was magnificent. Have you ever stood in a space that felt so much bigger than your past? That's what this house was. It wasn't just walls and windows. It was a physical representation of how much I had grown. I thought of the damp basement storage unit I just left, the cramped spare bedroom Richard had allowed me to use. He tried to make me small. He tried to put me in a box. And now, I owned a box so big, he couldn't even afford to look at it. My new kiln, a massive top-of-the-line model I'd ordered with my commission advance, was delivered the following week. The movers wheeled it into the new studio space, and I stood there for a long time, just looking at it. This was real. The divorce was set to be finalized on a Tuesday. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Helen, had called me the day before. Richard's lawyer is suggesting they finalize the paperwork at his office. They're still acting as if you're destitute, Margaret. They just want this over with so Richard can move on with his new life. I have a better idea, Helen, I said. Tell them the final signing needs to happen at my new residence. Tell them it's a condition of my accepting the settlement. They'll have to come to me. Your new... Oh. Oh, that's delicious. You're sure? I'm positive. Send them the address, but just the address. No name. Let them think it's just some random neutral location. Consider it done, Helen said. See you tomorrow at 10.
The next morning, I didn't dress up. I didn't put on makeup. I didn't try to look like the successful artist I had become. I went to my new studio, put on my old clay-stained jeans and my oversized sweater, the exact outfit I'd been wearing the day Richard left me. I pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail and sat down at my wheel. I was halfway through shaping a large platter when the doorbell chimed through the house's intercom system. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked down the grand staircase, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. I looked through the peephole, and there they were. Richard, looking impatient and impeccable in his suit, and Vanessa, clinging to his arm, looking smug and triumphant. She'd come for the final victory lap, to watch the final severance of her new man from his pathetic old wife. I took a deep breath, and I opened the door. Their faces were a perfect snapshot of cognitive dissonance. They looked at me, then at the massive foyer behind me, then back at me. Richard spoke first. His voice was tight, confused. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" He glanced past me as if expecting someone else to appear. Are you cleaning this place? Did you get a job as a housekeeper for the new owners?" Vanessa, meanwhile, had let go of his arm and stepped forward, her eyes wide with adoration for the house. "Oh my God, Richard, this is it. This is the one. This is the house we saw online." "I know," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Won't you come in? Helen is on her way. We have papers to sign." I stepped back, holding the door open. They walked in, shell-shocked. Richard's eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the reality in front of him. Vanessa was still in her fantasy, touching the wall, gazing up at the chandelier. "This place is incredible," she breathed. "Who bought it? Do you know them? Richard, we have to meet them. Maybe they'd sell if we offered." They're not selling, I said. They both turned to look at me. I was just standing there, an average-looking, middle-aged woman, covered in clay, standing in the middle of a $1.2 million foyer. I don't understand, Richard said, his frustration mounting. Where is the owner? Why are we signing here? This is unprofessional. And why are you here? I'm here because it's my house, Richard.
Vanessa let out a small, sharp laugh. That's not funny, Margaret. Tell us what's going on. I just told you, I said, walking past them into the vast, empty living room. My voice echoed slightly. I bought it 3 weeks ago. Cash offer, full asking price. The owners were thrilled. Apparently, they had another couple who was very interested, but was still trying to secure financing. I turned to face them. Vanessa's perfect makeup couldn't hide the sudden, ugly draining of color from her face. Richard? Richard looked like I had physically struck him. You... what? He stammered. Cash? Vanessa's voice was a squeak. That's impossible. You're lying. You live on ramen. I saw your grocery cart. My silly hobby, as you both called it, turned out to be quite profitable. The spring exhibition sold out. The museum acquisitions, the private commissions, it all adds up. You'd be surprised what people will pay for pointless projects. Richard was shaking his head over and over, as if trying to dislodge a thought that wouldn't fit. No, you couldn't. Not this house. This is my dream house. I've been working toward this for years. Yes, you have. I agreed. You talked about it all the time, which is why I knew it was the perfect place for me to start my new life. You did this to spite me, he whispered, his face turning a dark, mottled red. You did this just to hurt me. And right there, in that moment, was the climax of my entire life. The man who had called me worthless, who had discarded me like trash, was standing in the middle of my triumph, trying to make it about himself. Have you ever had a moment of such perfect, crystalline clarity? A moment where you see exactly who someone is and exactly who you are, and the gap between you is a canyon? This was that moment. No, Richard. I stepped closer, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. He looked small. I didn't do this to you. I did this for me. You were right about one thing. I was dead weight. I was a dreamer with no practical skills. I was a mediocre wife living in a mediocre house. His eyes flickered, a tiny spark of hope. I was harsh, Margaret. I didn't mean. But you were wrong about why. I was mediocre because I was shrinking myself to fit into the tiny box you built for me. I was dead weight because I was carrying you, your ego, your insecurities, your constant need to be the successful one. The second you cut me loose, the second you told me I was nothing, you didn't free yourself, Richard. You freed me. I pointed to the papers clutched in his hand. I'll take the $25,000. It'll be a nice little bonus for my materials fund. Vanessa finally found her voice. It was raw with envy and rage. You bitch? You think this is funny? You think you've won? He's still leaving you. He's still with me. Won? I almost laughed. This isn't a game. This is my life. And yes, he's with you. Congratulations. You've won a man who will drain you dry, who will only value you for your income, and who will, The moment you stop being successful, decide you're dead weight too. Good luck with that. I turned back to Richard. You wanted a successful, driven, ambitious woman. You had one. You just didn't know how to value her. You wanted this house. You wanted this life. I gestured around the magnificent empty room. Turns out, you couldn't afford it. But I could. The doorbell rang again. Helen, my lawyer, bright and professional. She walked in, took one look at Richard's and Vanessa's faces, and gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. Mr. and Miss Thompson, she said briskly, opening her briefcase on the marble kitchen counter. If you'll just sign here and here, this finalizes the dissolution and confirms receipt of the settlement. Richard moved like a robot. He couldn't meet my eyes. He signed the papers, his hands shaking. Vanessa was practically vibrating with fury, but she was smart enough to stay silent. Wonderful, Helen said, tucking the papers away. That's everything. You are officially divorced. Thank you, Helen. Richard and Vanessa just stood there, rooted to the spot. Well, I have a lot of work to do. My New York clients are expecting their new pieces soon. It was a clear dismissal. They had no choice but to walk out. As Richard passed me, he stopped, his voice barely audible. "22 years, Margaret, and this is how it ends? You just erase me?" I looked at the man I had loved, the man who had shattered me, and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just release. You erased me first, Richard. You told me I was worthless. You told me I was nothing. I just decided to believe you. I watched them walk down the long stone pathway. Vanessa was already yelling at Richard, her voice shrill in the quiet, wealthy neighborhood. He didn't answer, just slumped into the passenger seat of her luxury car. I closed the door. The heavy, solid thud echoed through the foyer. I stood in the silence, listening to the sound of their car driving away. It was over. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I simply walked back up the grand staircase, went into my beautiful, sunlit studio, and sat down at my wheel. I centered a new lump of clay, pressed my foot to the pedal, and felt the familiar, comforting rhythm as the wheel began to spin. I looked out the window, over the tops of the trees, at the sunlight sparkling on the lake. It was my lake. It was my house. It was my life.
And I was just getting started.
Margaret's story shows what it means to rise from the ashes. Being labeled worthless by the person closest to you is one of the deepest pains a person can endure. Maybe you've been in a similar situation. Maybe you've had someone call your passion a silly hobby. We're curious. What was the moment that broke you down the most? And how did you find the strength, like Margaret, to turn that moment into a victory? Or perhaps you're still searching for that strength. Share your experiences with us.